Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Logosophy talk, Turning Battles into Opportunity. I am thrilled to be here with you all. My name is Carolina Alcantara. I am a Pilates instructor and a student of Logosophy. Thank you so much for joining us. The Logosophical Foundation in the US and Canada is pleased to present a new cycle of lectures for all ages, especially for the young adults in the formation of young people as integral human beings. Schools and universities already have been fulfilling their professionalizing role. Logosophy, on the other hand, contributes for the formation of the human being as an integral being, who is learning to know itself, learn his position in all the environmentals they attend and they act in. In this new series of lectures on how to take charge of my life and transforming my world from within, different topics will be brought up to stimulate us and reflect together on our lives, and also on what values are needed to live in with it in a more conscious and fulfilling way. So this is an invitation for everyone to participate in these lectures. And in the next following weeks, we are going to present other lectures too, until the end of May. So please join us again. And if you enjoyed this content, share with friends and families. And now I have a question for you. Have you ever struggled into striking balance into your life? And how can you overcome it? This is a question that many of us made to ourselves at some point in our lives, especially now that life is so busy and filled with many tasks, challenges, and having to question our priorities. Since this may be your first contact with the Logosophical Foundation, I'll briefly share what the Constitution is. The Logosophical Foundation is a school dedicated to the self-betterment and is a non-profit organization. Here we are all volunteers. And Logosophy was created by the thinker and humanist Carlos Bernardo González Pecote in Argentina, 1930. And today there is study centers all over the US and today there is study centers in South and Central America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. In North America, there are students spread out through the US and Canada with a Logosophical Center in Miami, Florida. And there are also Logosophical schools in South America where they teach the regular grades and the Logosophical pedagogy, which teaches kids to learn how to think from themselves since young age. And one of the aims of Logosophy is to offer resources for the improvement of oneself. For this, it has a method which encourages one not to believe what the author brings, but rather to apply the knowledge in one's own life in order to experience what is studied and study what is experienced. In my case, I'm learning how to pay attention in my inner self, to observe my thoughts and in my mind, and also to select and cultivate the ones that will improve my life and my relationship with others. Today, our first talk is Turning Battles into Opportunities. And our speaker guest is Lara Aguiar. She is a researcher at the Logosophical Foundation in Florianópolis, Brazil. Graduated in medicine, and she did her residency in dermatology. Today, she's a dermatologist and works in Brazil. Lara is going to share with us, based on her study of Logosophy, experiences and techniques for conscious self-betterment that have helped her turn hard times into new opportunities. And before we get started, I want to quickly remind everyone to please stay tuned until the end of this talk, when we'll share more information about other activities, free courses, how to download free books, and more. And if you have any questions, please write it down on the chat and we might try to address them. And I hope you enjoy our talk, and let me pass the word to Lara now.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you everyone for watching. Before I start telling you about my experience in my professional life and the choices I have made, I'd like to leave you with some questions for reflection. What role does university or the profession play in your life today? Are there any choices I can make that will improve my perspective on this part of life? And if yes, how do I feel about this choice? Is it easy to make? What do I need to decide? While you think about those, I will tell you a little bit about my life. I like to say that logosophy is an auxiliary science to other sciences, and this became very clear to me when I was in college. But before I get to that, I will tell you a little bit about how I got to medical school, about this choice. In the year of the admission exams, I wasn't sure of what I wanted to do. I was thinking about 3 options: medicine and 2 other degrees that are not in the health area. I ended up deciding for medicine because I felt I was a capable person and I didn't want to regret in the future for having chosen another option because it demanded less from me. So this is how I got into medicine. At that time, during the preparatory exam for college, I also began to study logosophy. And that was when I learned a concept that made a big difference in my life. I'm going to read you an extract from the book Introduction to Logosophical Cognition that talks about it. Struggle is the law of life, which must be confronted not once, but 1,000 times, and not with vacillation, but by being fully conscious of what it is inescapable. In order for man to reach his highest goal, it is necessary that he fight, knowing how to do it. Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought that struggle, the challenges, the difficulties, they are an inherent part of life? That there is no life without struggle? I admit that at that time, I had never really thought about it. I was studying to pass my college admission exams, and I imagined that when I entered college, my life would be better. But in my mind, I associated better with easier. In a certain way, unconsciously, I thought that life would be easier than in the preparatory course, just like life with a degree would be better than life as a college student. But does it make sense? What do you think? I started to observe people around me who were older and in another stage of life, especially my mom. Looking at her life, it was clear that her life was much more complex than mine, with responsibilities and challenges greater than mine. And just like my mom, observing the lives of so many other people, it was not so difficult to prove that, just as the author of Logosophy says in this extract we just read, that struggle is an inevitable part of life. But then if I can't avoid challenges, how can I best deal with them? About this, Logosophy further teaches the following. Please, Carolina. When the struggles which life presents seem harsh to you, soften them. Do not make them still harsher by becoming pessimistic or by letting your fortitude dwindle. You should always turn the battle into a teaching. Make the battle sweet when it seems bitter to you. You will see how the observance of this advice will lead you to triumph. This extract teaches me several things. That I must not make a problem bigger than it already is. That I must avoid being pessimistic, because by being pessimistic, I make the struggle even more difficult. And above all, that I can make the struggle into a lesson. That is, that I can learn from the challenges I experience. Learning all these aspects made me understand one thing. Challenges exist in my life today, and they will always exist. Denying their existence or fighting with them only makes me waste time and energy that I could be using to face them. It seems very simple and very obvious talking like this, but in practice, it's not always so simple. After all, who here has never wanted to have someone else's life, which apparently is easier than their own? Or wanted to do another course because it feels more relaxed, have another job because it seems to require less? Anyway, I see that as obvious as it may be, if you don't want to play the victim, if I don't want to play the victim for the challenges I have in my life, I need to constantly remind myself that they are an inevitable part of it. Continuing my story, so I passed the admission exam for medical school and entered university. In the first year, which is part of the so-called basic cycle, I studied in a similar way to the preparatory course, and I didn't have much difficulty. When the second year started, we started to have more real medicine subjects, including practical classes. Then I began to have more difficulty because I did not have the same enthusiasm as most of my colleagues for both theoretical and practical studies. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever noticed that something was not right, but you couldn't quite figure out what it was? And what can I do in a situation like this? I also realized that since the previous year, I had been less committed to classes, especially practical classes, and felt less skilled than my colleagues, which discouraged me from volunteering to do the physical exam in a practical class or start extracurricular activities. After all, it seemed that my colleagues were way ahead of me. When I finally came to realize the position I was in, I felt bad because I saw that I had a lot of room for improvement. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever found yourself facing a challenge so big that it seems like a huge mountain that needs to be climbed and you just don't know where to start? That's how I felt at that time. I was in the third year of medical school, and I had a lot of room to improve if I wanted to be a good doctor in the future. So I had to come face to face with the choice to take this course. As I've already told you, when I began my studies in medical school, I wasn't sure if I wanted that. And because I didn't have that big dream that many have when they choose this career, I didn't have the same interest and natural disposition as my colleagues. And I found myself in a position of going along rather than going in search of what needed to be done. And now, what to do? Give up? Continue in the same way? Change? But how to change? Will I be able to climb this mountain? There are many options to choose from, aren't there? And have you ever noticed that when you see another person going through a problem, it seems that it is much easier to see the solution to their problem than it is to see our own problem? Sometimes I even offer advice and think, how come the other person can't see that it's so simple to solve this problem? That's right. I have noticed that it's easier to analyze a situation when I'm outside of it. And that is what Logosophy teaches us about problems, that they should be faced in an impersonal way. A general tendency is to place oneself inside one's own problem. My advice is to always take an impersonal position, that is, to think in the same way as one would about the problems of others. When I put myself outside the problem, analyzing as if the problem belonged to someone else, I can see things more clearly. And that is what it means to see a problem in an impersonal way. Logosophy also teaches this. Please, Carolina. Life must not be placed inside our problems, but rather problems should be placed inside our life. Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever felt that your life was inside a big problem that seemed to have no solution? Placing the problems inside my life and not my life inside them is another resource that helps me to give a problem its due proportion, without letting it take up all the space in my life. And with that, it makes it easier to see it from the outside, that is, in an impersonal way. And that was what I decided to do with my experience. I can already tell you that these reflections and the understanding that I'm presenting to you today were not born overnight, but were the result of a study and the learning process of months and even years. But Logosophy was fundamental in this process because it helped me to live in a better way those challenges that my academic and professional life bring me. As Logosophy teaches me to observe what I think and feel, I started to be more attentive, and I identified two main conflicts happening inside me. The first told me I needed to dedicate myself more to university because I was intelligent and I was not doing all that I was capable of doing. I needed to pay more attention to this part of my life. On the other hand, the second movement would tell me this: is academic and professional life really that important? I knew that this is one part of my life and that profession was not the biggest goal in life. So really, did I need to dedicate that much to it? Have you ever been through something similar? Have you ever asked yourself if your profession is really all that in your life? If it really deserves all the time you dedicate to it, or if it's just too much? What is the right proportion of the profession in my life? If I'm sure that my profession is not the only goal in my life, how much do I need to dedicate to it? I asked myself many of these questions when I was in university, and I ask them until this day, because I see that circumstances change over the years. And I even ask myself again some of the same questions I used to ask a long time ago. So in the experience of medical school, after a lot of reflection, I understood that both movements were right. I could dedicate myself more to my studies than I was doing at the time, and that would be very important to make me a good professional in the future. But it was also clear that my life should not be reduced to living medicine 24 hours a day. So I would have to find a way of reconciling medicine and life in general. But how do I start a change? How do I go from being the student who did nothing in practical classes to being the student who is willing to exercise in front of everyone? Is this a simple choice? That's where the freedom of thinking comes in. When it became clear that I needed to change, my biggest limitation became fear. Fear of what others would think when they saw me doing something I had done before. Fear of what they would say when I messed up something they knew better than me. But above all those fears was the main one, was the fear of not recognizing myself in the new way of being. I realized that these are obstacles that often prevent me from making choices and decisions that are very necessary in my life, especially the choices and decisions that will allow me to take steps forward in my journey. Logosophy helped me a lot in this process, and that's why it became clear to me that Logosophy is an auxiliary science to other sciences. It helped me especially to be more sure of what was right and what I wanted for myself. And it was this conviction that gave me the strength to overcome these obstacles that I had and that were preventing me from being what I wanted to do, both in medicine and in life. The purpose of this talk today was to tell you a little, and I mean just a little, about how Logosophy has helped me be happier and overcome the challenges that my profession present me. If what we have been talking makes you feel something different inside of you, it may be because there is a part of you that wants to know more about this subject. If you're interested in learning more about Logosophy, the best way is to subscribe for a free course where you can start to study and apply it to your own life. We will paste the link to the application form on the chat. Additionally, you can also read any of the Logosophical books completely for free on the website logosophy.org. The link is also in the chat. You can also find more videos here on our YouTube channel with talks where other students of Logosophy, just like us, share their experiences. And you're all invited to join us in the live lectures just like this one that will happen in the next few weeks. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more information. That's it for today. In the name of the Logosophical Foundation, we thank you for participating in this talk and wish you all a good day.